Welcome back to WD.
FM, the official Walt Disney Family Museum podcast. We're your hosts, Bri Bertolacini, Marketing Manager.
And Chris Mullen, Marketing and Editorial Specialist at the Walt Disney Family Museum.
We have a very special episode today. On August 19th, 2023, we hosted an in-person program. It's A Dog's Life with Disney legend Bill Farmer and special guests from Guide Dogs for the Blind. Now, Bill Farmer, Disney legend and voice of Goofy, discussed his television show for Disney Plus, It's a Dog's Life with Bill Farmer, that came out in 2020, and it highlighted working dogs across the United States. Following the talk, our guests from Guide Dogs for the Blind provided an overview of their life-changing mission and showcased the skills of two of their highly trained service dogs in a demonstration.
To kick off this episode, we're going to share some clips from the program, then stay tuned for an illuminating interview with Guide Dogs for the Blind President and CEO, Chris Benninger.
Now, Chris, you attended this program. How was it?
It was great. Bill Farmer talked about his Disney journey and showed clips from the show, which were positively entertaining. And Guide Dogs for the Blind really stole the show with their live demonstration. When the Q&A came around, our audience had more questions for the dogs than Bill. Following the Q&A, our speakers went out onto the museum lawn for a meet and greet. We've never had a program quite like it, and it's so cool that we can cross over with this kind of program thanks to our public programs team and the many possibilities afforded by our current special exhibition, Disney Cats and Dogs.
Well, that program sounded like so much fun, and I'm excited to revisit it today for our podcast episode because I missed it. And I also just love hearing about dogs with jobs, so that's why I love learning about Guide Dogs for the Blind. They're so interesting, and our conversation with Chris was so interesting as well. And Bill Farmer's show, It's a Dog's Life, was amazing. It was on Disney Plus. It is no longer, but I hope it comes back soon.
Me too. I missed it the first time around, but those clips alone got me hooked. Or leashed, for that matter.
Yep.
For that matter. Well, without further ado, let's get into the program.
My name's Bill Farmer, and I don't know how many of you know what I do, but I am immersed in dog life. Not only It's a Dog's Life, which is a live-action show on Disney Plus that I got to produce as well as host because I just love dogs, but also for the last 36 years, I've been voicing Goofy and Pluto, a couple of very important Disney dogs. Now, if any of you have been through the exhibit, Cats and Dogs, Disney Cats and Dogs, you probably noticed that Goofy is not there. And that is because Goofy is not a dog. Pluto is a dog. Some people think that, come up to me, I heard that Goofy was a cow. No, he is not a cow. His original name was Dippy Dog, but it's D-A-W-G, not D-O-G. So he's kind of a canine, but he's not, in the same way a wolf is a canine, but he's not a dog. Goofy is Goofy. I think his Latin name would be Canis goofus. He's that species. But he's kind of one of a kind. And I've been doing that voice since January of 1987. And you might ask yourself, how do you get a job doing the voice of Goofy? Well, he was my favorite Disney character growing up. I would watch, Wonderful World of Color on Sunday nights on my dad's lap, and I would see Goofy cartoons and everything. And I would run around the house kind of trying to do the voice. And I just practiced all sorts of different voices. And, probably annoyed my parents to no end with voices. And any celebrity that I saw on TV, I would try and do their voice. An old John Wayne movie or something, I'd come to the dinner table and, well, okay, Mom, let's get those potatoes in a circle, and my dad would look at me and something's wrong with him, And never knowing it would turn into a career. But I started doing those voices and just practicing cartoon voices as well as live action actors, and did that all through high school and college, became a radio DJ for a number of years, then got into stand-up comedy back in 1982 in Dallas. Did that for about 6 years before I, on the advice of an agent in Dallas, where I lived, said, you ought to go out to Hollywood and give it a shot. Now, ignorance was bliss in my case because I didn't know how hard it is to get a job in television. I went out in the summer of '86, and as luck would have it, about 5 months later, my agent that I was able to obtain said, "Do you do any of the Disney characters?" And well, yeah, we've all probably done a Mickey voice or a Donald voice or something, just playing around with them. But Goofy was my favorite. And so, gosh, sure, I can do Goofy's voice. And my wife says that I was Goofy long before I got paid for it, so that helped. And ignorance was bliss. Out of about 1,200 people that tried out, they picked mine. And as luck would have it, they not only just used me once, they don't sign you to a long-term contract. Every job is a new contract. Well, I'm an independent contractor. I'm like the plumber. I come in, I do a job, I go home. It's still that way after 36 years. And I've been so fortunate to have a character like Goofy, and this is one time in my life where a dog changed my life. And Pluto was along at the same time, although there was not an audition for that. It was actually because of Goofy I got the role of Pluto. I was doing a television show. They needed some barking, and can you bark? Row, row, row! You know, that'll work. And that was the audition for Pluto, and now I've been doing that for 36 years. It is so much fun. Over the years, we've had so much fun with the character. I've done about 4,000 different shows for Disney, record albums and toys and all that kind of stuff. And that was kind of the first miracle in my life. It gave me a career. A dog gave me a career that I'm still doing to this day. All my friends say, well, you're old enough, why don't you retire? And I would never retire from this job because it is too much fun. The second miracle in my life was It's a Dog's Life. Now, if you haven't seen that show, it's no longer on Disney Plus. We got shelved for a while with all of the stuff that's going on with, streaming services and everything. Hopefully, it'll come back soon. How did this come about? Because it's a whole different part of the showbiz universe. You don't get to produce shows just because you're on them as an actor. I was, like I say, an independent contractor. I'd come in and do my lines. I'd go home. I didn't really worry about the producing, the directing, the creating of a show. But the way that this show came about was that I was with a friend of mine who, Steve Duvall, lives in Reno. I was visiting him. He had asked me to host a television show that he was going to do for local television up in Reno. He was one of the cameramen on the show The Amazing Race for like 28 seasons. His passport looked like a phone book. It was all over the place. Fascinating guy, but he wanted to do a local show on an equestrian center in Reno where they do like the fox hunts. They dress up in the English things. They have the little walker, the walker hounds that kind of go, yes, tally-ho. There's no fox out there. They just kind of take the horses out for exercise and the dogs out for exercise. And I came up to Reno, and we were playing around with the dogs because I love dogs. And I was, they had 50 Walker hounds. And I was trying to come up with lines and everything, and I was doing Arnold Schwarzenegger, you dog's out of shape, you're flabby, come on, let's go get the coyote, And that footage kind of jumped out at us. And we said, hey, that's what the show should be about. It should be about dogs that have interesting jobs. And I thought, well, maybe through my contacts at Disney, I could get them interested in it. And so we put a little what's called a sizzle reel together of some of the shots of this particular thing with the dogs and me playing with the dogs. And we were able to take it in, and we came up what's called a pitch line or a pitch of the show. Has to be very simple so they can understand this, that they'll say, yeah, that's a good idea. And my pitch was, okay, I've been voicing animated dogs for 35 years. Now I'm stepping out from behind the microphone to find out about real dogs that have real interesting jobs. They said, I understand that. And they said, we would like to buy that. Now, that's the first time I've ever pitched a show, and we sold the show. Now, the first day they said, oh, we'd like to see a pilot of this show to see what it's going to be like. They called the very next day and said, no, we want the whole series. So we shot about 20 episodes of different dogs that have different fascinating jobs. We had to take a crew around to, I think, 11 states in 5.5 months shooting this. It was a joy of a lifetime. It's the second miracle in my life. Goofy was first. It's a Dog's Life was the second miracle. because I love dogs. Dogs are incredible. They're the most varied species on earth. Every dog is the same species, a little Chihuahua, a giant Mastiff. They're all the same species. And I found out so much that I didn't know about dogs in this series. For example, their nose is incredible. We did a couple of shows on avalanche rescue dogs where they buried me in the snow in Telluride, Colorado to train the avalanche rescue dogs, which can smell a human under 20 feet of snow. When we did this show, they buried me in the snow. They made kind of like a little igloo, put me in there, and the dog found me in about a minute and a half. We had to have the dog do it over and over so we had enough footage for the show. Our first episode, I swear, this is absolutely, we did this first because Disney did not want us to do this show because it sounded too, naughty, I guess. It was a dog that finds whale poop. Now you might say, well, why do they want to find whale poop? Well, the scientists up at the University of Washington are studying the orcas, the killer whales. They've been decreasing in numbers and they want to find out why. Well, you got to find out what they eat. You have to find, they don't give blood samples willingly, so you have to find the poop. Now, you can follow the whale and just wait and look around for something. Or, in this case, they had a dog that they trained to find the whale poop. They went from 3 samples to over 150 samples in the same length of time because of a dog's incredible sense of smell. They're helping the whales out. That's probably a job you never thought of that dogs are doing. We had the rescue dogs in the snow. We had dogs that find a disease in beehives. The mayor of Rabbit Hash, Kentucky is a dog. We went down there to interview. Why did you hire a dog? Why did you vote a dog in as your mayor? One guy said, well, he's a lot better than the guy we had, But actually what they do, you can vote on these dogs with $1 a vote. You can vote as many times as you want. They use those monies to keep the little historic town of Rabbit Hash in condition, to repair the roads, stuff like that. And they've actually had a donkey be the mayor. They've had a couple of dogs. It was a pit bull when we did our show. We've had guide dogs. We've had rescue dogs where, like avalanches and earthquakes that topple buildings, you have to search through all of that rubble, teach the dogs how not to cut their feet and still find someone. So they put me in a pipe in a big rubble of concrete and everything. I got to do so many fantastic things. The way the show finally, if you haven't seen the show, that it turned out to be, we'd had 2 stories in each half-hour show. We also had Pluto's Pointers, and we had which teach you how to take care of your dog at home. And it was based more for kids. It was kind of aimed at the younger audience. And also Goofy's Hometown Heroes, about dogs that have done amazing things that we didn't have enough material for an entire segment on. And we didn't shoot these. People sent them in from like YouTube videos and things like that. And it was just a joy to produce this particular show. We have some live action dogs here. So not only, gosh, we don't just have animated dogs. We have real dogs too.
So hopefully you're familiar with us, but if not, we want to have you get to know us a little bit better. We're actually just headquartered across the bridge in San Rafael, California, and we have a second campus in Boring, Oregon. And really what we do, we're a broad, passionate community that works so hard together to really create these exceptional guide dogs that are really enabled to help people do whatever they want to do in their lives. We've been around since 1942, and at that time we were mostly serving folks that had come back from World War II and had been injured, but over time our programs and our clients have really evolved. So we have lawyers and doctors and students and professors. Really, people can do anything that they want to do, particularly with a guide dog by their side. And then something that's so near and dear to my heart is our Canine Buddy program. We recently expanded it. It's for kids 5 and older, and there's no upper limit for adults. And those are dogs that are not well suited to be guide dogs. And for kids, they can be this great source of companionship and confidence, help with sensory integration, and do all kinds of things. And that's effectively like an on-ramp to what we call the guide dog lifestyle. There are older folks who may be an off-ramp. They've been a guide dog user, and they don't really need to have that level of mobility anymore, but would benefit by having a guide a canine buddy in their life. And we serve everyone in between. We're here really to meet people where they are, which is amazing. And what's important to note is we don't charge anything for any of our services. We rely solely on basically the generosity of our donors. And we also couldn't do it without our amazing volunteers. There's a number of wonderful puppy raising volunteers in the audience today. We also have folks who are breeder custodians for us, people that work in our offices and the gift shop, all manner of things. And so we're basically this giant, passionate community. At the same time, we're also a school. We're the largest in North America and the second largest in the world, so second only to Britain. But we collaborate really broadly with schools, not only across the United States, but across the world. And so we also have, or had a show on Disney+. We've been shelved as well, so we're in great company. We feel like we're still hoping it'll come back. It was called Pick of the Litter, and it basically, who's seen it? Who's here today? Yes, excellent. So that series was based on a global documentary that we did, and then it was picked up by Disney+. You can still see the global documentary. It's on Fubi and a number of other streaming platforms. So that one is a little bit different than the series, so I recommend that you check it out because that was from the moment a litter was born. We follow that. So it's the ultimate outcome of whether these dogs become guide dogs or not. What's interesting is sometimes people will come to us, say at 5, and they get a canine buddy. When they're a teen, they'll go to one of our camps. We had a young man who did both those things. He got his guide dog in high school. They're now thriving at Yale together, which is awesome. And he may have 5 or 6 more guide dogs from us. Makes me kind of misty. As a mom, he's doing so well, and that's what we're here for. And so we'd love to have your support, but we want to take a minute and show you some of the amazing things that these dogs do. Take it from here.
All right, I'm Jessica, and I'm here with Tahoe. She's a Black Lab Golden Retriever cross.
And I'm Claire. I have Forsyth. He is also a Golden Retriever, Labrador Retriever cross. They're both crosses. We have both Golden Retrievers, Labrador Retrievers, and then crosses between the two. You can see that they look more similar than dissimilar.
Yeah, they both got that golden look, but the short hair of the lab. So we find these two breeds work really well in our program. They're very adaptable, trainable, eager to please. If you've had those breeds before, you'll probably know what I'm talking about. So before we get into our demo, we're just going to talk a little bit about what a guide dog does, how they work with a client, and a little bit about our training process, so you know a little bit about what you're seeing. So really, it's all about teamwork with a guide and a client. So Karen mentioned, if you imagine driving in a car, the dog is the driver and the client's the navigator. So the client needs to know their routes and their area, and they learn that through orientation and mobility training. And then they're the ones that provide directional cues to the dogs as they're working, and the dog gets them to their destination safely. So like I said, the dogs respond to directional cues. They're also taught to move fluidly around obstacles. They stop at curbs or other elevation changes like stairs. And they're also watching out for traffic that could become a danger to the team, either in the crossings or driveways on the sidewalk, things like that. Like that teamwork, that's what's so important is that bond that they have. So it's definitely them working together. It's they each share the load of that work that they do together. So I wanted to share some common misconceptions that could be out there. So how many people currently are thinking that the dog reads traffic lights or the traffic signals? So we do get that question a lot. The dogs do not read traffic signals. That would be really helpful if they did, but they do not. So that's the client. So that's part of their orientation mobility training. It's their job. So the dog approaches a crossing, they stop at the curb. It's the client's job to read. And when I say read, I mean listening to the flow of traffic. If you ever stand at a red, you're standing on the sidewalk and there's a red light, when that light turns green, that surge of traffic that goes, that's what a client's listening for. And that's when they know they've got a fresh light to cross. The dog's part is one, they're crossing in a straight line to the other side, what we call the up curb. But they're also watching out for any traffic that maybe the client didn't hear, or a right turner, things like that. So that command into the street is go forward if it's safe to do so. So that's where the dog can take over. The dog will refuse the command if it's not safe, if there's a car there. Another one is, Like I said, it's teamwork and the client is the navigator. So you can't tell a dog, go to the store, go to the post office, or let's go to the coffee shop, which would also be helpful. But it's the client that needs to know where they're going. So the dog is going from, curb to curb down the block. And, when they get to the end of a block, the client's telling them if they're continuing straight, if they're turning left or right. So they're working together in that respect. Now the dogs are smart and they learn our habits. So of course they're going to start learning the route. They, if you take your dog on a walk, they know your turns and where you're going. So that's that teamwork coming in. So the dog will actually start indicating, say your coffee shop is on this block. The dogs obviously, if they've gone there several times, they're going to start indicating like, here's our turn coming up. And that's one of the huge benefits of a guide is their memory and them wanting to indicate where they've been before versus working with a cane. Obviously, cane is not going to indicate that your coffee shop's coming up. Another misconception is playtime. We get this question a lot. Do your dogs play? Are they always working? And the answer is they play all the time. So being out on the street and working is a small portion. It's a very important portion of their lives, but it's a small portion. So it's an important part of our training cycle. Our dogs play pretty much daily. In the kennels when they're not working, on the weekends while we're not there. We have kennel staff that are letting them play. They play in groups as well, so they have dog-to-dog interaction. You'll see us not allowing them to interact with dogs on the street, but when they're not working, they're playing with their kennel mates. They have roommates in the kennel. We also teach this to our clients that playtime is so important because you figure us, if we're working all the time, we never take vacation. That's where we get burnout. So same with our dogs. Play is so important, so they play every day.
So a question I get a lot when I'm out just training is, how long does it take to train a guide dog? Now, it's actually a surprising short amount of time. We have a 12-week training cycle, so it takes about 3 months. Obviously every dog is a little different, so some might take a little longer than others, but generally it takes about 3 months. Both these guys are finished guides, so they've gone through the whole 12-week program, and now they're just awaiting placement. The other thing, which you might have seen me kind of use intermittently, and how we get our dogs to use it is by using a reinforcement. And in this case, we don't use raw meat like the cheetah. We use a kibble. So I take a little bit out of his daily ration, and we'll give him kibble just to reinforce and provide that motivation to keep working. We also use a clicker, which we'll be using in a little bit, that actually has a click to help reinforce it and help tell them, like, this is the behavior I want you to repeat. Forsyth, sit. Wow, good boy. So I click, and then the click means he immediately gets food, just like that. And of course they love it, and as these guys are, they're very, I know, she's like, hey, where's mine? So we always are constantly reinforcing them, and we also use secondary reinforcement like petting and verbal praise, like good boy, like so he knows this is exactly what I want him to do. Now these guys both are like, let's get to work, like they know there's a demo coming up, so they're very motivated. We also, as they progress through training, right, so they start with the basics like learning curbs, stopping at doorways, having pull and lead. So if you ever see us working the dog is actually pulling us and help guiding us. So that's kind of the beginning. We're doing the basic fundamentals. As they progress through training, of course, they start to get a little more challenging. So that's when we take them out on escalators, we do elevators, we do go out into the city. Sometimes you might see us, we're in San Francisco, going on BART, for example, working with platforms. So they learn much more challenging concepts. First, I think we're gonna do our intelligent disobedience demonstrations. So what I'm doing is creating a narrow space right here. So while this isn't totally common, this might be something you might see in a construction zone, for example, or we also can transfer this to something like a doorway, something that's too narrow for both the team and the dog to pass, right? We don't want him to just go through and you hit the obstacle, right? You want them to show you where to stop. And the other thing we do is when they stop and show it to you, you can find it, right? So you might find Jessica will do kind of an arm probe, try and sweep and find it. Maybe she doesn't find it. Yep. Oh, so what she did was she didn't find it. She probed out. And what she did was, if this was like a client or somebody who's working with the team, They might ask him to hop up, like, why are you stopping?
you.
There's
Good
no
girl.
reason for you to stop. However, the dog knows, actually, there is something here, and I'm going to refuse the command. So we call that intelligent disobedience, or IDO. This can be done with traffic training, for example, like doorways, anything where there's that narrow passage. Yeah, and she's like, oh, there it is.
Loves
Good
it. She'll show
job.
it to me again.
Yeah, she'll show it to you again.
Good.
So it's a really nice way. It's a team effort, right? So not only should the handler try and find it, but maybe on accident they don't find said object, the dog can refuse the command and say, actually, no, it's not safe to go past here until you find it. When they refuse that command, Jessica would, probe out, find it, and the second she finds it, she's like, oh my gosh, good job. Yeah, you're right. That was right. I was incorrect, but you did it. And so we really reward that behavior. And it can be a challenging behavior to teach, right? These dogs are so willing and want to do the right thing that it's really hard for them to want to refuse a command, although she did excellently. So very good job.
Yeah, she was not going to go until she got her reward.
Yeah, she's like, no, this is a trick.
Found that.
Yeah, and so they also find stuff like elevation changes, right? So she actually put both her paws on this first step right there, just to show like, hey, this is an elevation change. Same thing with IDO can happen, like maybe at the top of a staircase. Maybe the person doesn't know that they're at the top of the staircase. You ask them, Tahoe forward, and you didn't find where that ledge is, she might also refuse that command. And then when you find it, good girl, you really reward that.
Well, that was such a fun program and so great to relive. Hopefully you didn't get too much FOMO, Bri, from not being able to be there for the event itself, but you got to have a little taste of it here.
Yes, exactly. That was amazing. Well, now let's get into the interview with Christine Benninger. Now, Christine, also goes by Chris, joined Guide Dogs for the Blind in April of 2014. Chris brings a wealth of nonprofit and for-profit experience to her role. Under Chris's leadership, Guide Dogs for the Blind has expanded its program offerings to include orientation and mobility training for individuals with insufficient skills to qualify for guide dog training, a companion dog program for visually impaired children, and advocacy in support of GDB's visually impaired communities. In addition, annual fundraising has tripled since 2014, and a new state-of-the-art puppy center has been built. Current organization-wide initiatives include diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as full accessibility throughout GDB and its communication channels. She holds an MBA from Stanford University. Chris loves to ride her bike, hike, and travel, and she loves dogs and has two of her own, Thea, a career-changed golden retriever, and Thea now serves as an ambassador for GDB, as well as Boone, a basset hound. We are so excited to welcome Christine Benninger, President and CEO of Guide Dogs for the Blind. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Thank you so much. I'm so thrilled to be here.
We're so happy to have you. And, just to give us an overview of the mission, what is the mission for Guide Dogs for the Blind to kick us off?
Yeah, it's a pretty simple mission. It's really all about giving individuals who are blind or visually impaired their independence through the use of a well-trained service dog.
Awesome. And as the largest guide dog school in North America, what are some of the fundamental services that are provided and that guide dogs help their clients with?
Yeah, we have a full range of services. Our goal really is to be able to serve our clients from, lack of a better term, birth to death. We're not quite there yet, but it starts with our youth services. And that's, really around things like Camp GDB. Camp GDB is really all about bringing, high school kids together, not only to learn about the guide dog lifestyle, but to really learn that there's nothing that will hold you back being blind or visually impaired. You can do whatever you want to do. It's an opportunity for kids to meet other kids just like them, and lifelong friendships are made. We have a pre-guide dogs program which teaches people their orientation and mobility skills, because that is one of the key things that people need to have before using a guide dog. And those skills are becoming more and more difficult to obtain. So what we found about 6 years ago is that 40% of the people who applied to guide dogs were denied because they didn't have those skills. So we started our own program. What orientation mobility means is orienting yourself within your environment as someone who's blind, giving people those skills, and then people come back anywhere from 6 to 12 months later to get a guide dog. We have what's called a canine buddy program, which is a well-trained companion dogs for kids who are blind or visually impaired and too young to get a guide dog, but it helps to build confidence with kids. It's you're also the coolest kid on the block with this dog. And actually, we've expanded that program to also include adult canine buddies, because there are clients of ours who really no longer need the services of a guide dog because they're just not traveling as much. But the companionship makes all the difference in the world.
That is so wonderful. I love that. And can you I kind of talk about a little bit about why it is important that people who have guide dogs, before they get their guide dog, have an awareness in how to navigate themselves? Because I think if you don't know anything about, a guide dog, you're like, well, the dog is just going to take you where you need to go, or like, they'll make sure you don't run into traffic. So why is that important?
Yeah, so that's a great question, because people automatically think that, the dog is just going to take you where you need to go. The dog will take you where you need to go, but you have to give the dog instructions on how to get there. And so, because the dog is not a GPS system, you can't just hold onto the harness and say, great, take me to Starbucks, right? You have to know that Starbucks is 3 blocks, north, and, 2 blocks east. And you need to be able to give your dog those instructions, and your dog will take you there safely. So as somebody who's blind or visually impaired, it's a skill to learn how to orient yourself in your environment, how to, let's take an example. How do you know when it's when the right time is to cross the street? Not all street lights have audio cues to say it's time to walk. You have to be able to listen to traffic and know whether that traffic is parallel to you or perpendicular to you. It's parallel to you, that means it's, safe to cross the street. If it's perpendicular to you, no. That's the time that you wait. So it's skills like that that are critically important. The dog's role is to make certain that you get there safe.
Wow. Well, and it seems like there's training to do on both sides. Certainly, you think about the docuseries Pick of the Litter that documents the ups and downs of a very adorable group of 6 dogs on their quest to becoming guides for guide dogs for the blind. But it showed how difficult the training process was for a dog to graduate the program and be selected as an official guide dog. So what are some of the kind of key principles that a dog has to meet in order to be able to work as a guide dog?
Yeah, guide work is the most complicated of all types of service work, which is one of the reasons that not every single one of our dogs actually qualifies or makes it all the way through. The other thing, part of the reason that the job is so complicated is that guide dogs have to make decisions that are independent of their person, and they have to disobey their person if that command is going to put their person in harm's way. Now, when you think about that, that is a very challenging thing to do. It's challenging for us. I don't know how often you say no to your boss. I don't very often or ever, right? It's just, and dogs live in a hierarchy. So the handler is always, the alpha in the relationship, and the dog has to be confident enough to say no. So that's it's a pretty amazing skill. Secondly, guide work takes enormous concentration. So, when a guide is working, they're focused specifically on being able to take their person safely around obstacles from one, place to the next. They have to completely ignore that dog that's barking at them, or a ball that runs in front of them, or, people on the street. And that also is, highly, again, it takes a very, very special dog to do that. Approximately 50% of our dogs make it all the way through as a guide dog. It doesn't mean that each one of our dogs is absolutely perfect, but not everybody wants the same job. So one of the reasons that we established our Canine Buddy program is because so many of our dogs are absolutely fantastic. They're just not right for guide work, but they're perfect as buddy dogs.
I fell in love with the docuseries Pick of the Litter, and it was just so heartbreaking when a dog didn't make it all the way through. But these dogs take their job so seriously, and some pick a different career path, and I love that so much. And you spoke about the special dogs that do kind of make it through, that it's about 50%. The guide dogs that were actually brought to the museum for our recent program were both retriever mixes. Now, does breed play a role into what dogs are suitable to serve as guide dogs?
Breed plays a huge role. And if you look worldwide, 80% of all service dogs are either labs or golden retrievers. Those are the two types of dogs that Guide Dogs for the Blind uses. And we also create a mix between the two. So Guide Dogs for the Blind has, the largest breeding colony of labs or golden retrievers in North America. The creation of a guide dog starts at the DNA level. We actually employ geneticists to help us determine what's the best DNA to bring together to get the traits that we're looking for. The dogs that you see are the dogs that we have at Guide Dogs for the Blind are, I'll say, different, I'll put that in quotes, than what you're going to see in the general population. Our dogs are bred to be, to mature early because they're taking on this very, very important job at 18 months of age. I don't know how many Labrador retrievers that that are mature enough at 18 months of age to have a job. Most of the labs I know are like, whoa, at that age. But we've found that, labs and Goldens make, the best types of service dogs. They're very sociable. They're very caring. They have, a fantastic work ethic. They love to work. They're also dogs that the public kind of relates to. They're not afraid of. And part of the role of a guide dog is to be a bridge to the community. So as someone who's blind or visually impaired, it's quite lonely, actually, because we connect through sight. And when you don't have sight, it's very hard to connect. So when you have this, beautiful lab or golden by your side, people come to you, right? They want to talk to you. Oh my God, can I pet your dog? Tell me about your dog. That helps one connect. And one other interesting little factoid is that labs and goldens can be taught to walk in a straight line. And that's critically important for being a guide dog.
Certainly. Well, and you just brought up that, when you have a dog with you, a lot of people will want to approach you on the street with the social element of it. But obviously, when guide dogs are working, they're working. They've got their identifiable harness on. What are some kind of best practices the public can do or not do when they enter a space where a guide dog is present?
Thank you so much for asking that question, because when a guide dog is in harness, even if that dog is just sitting quietly by someone's side, that dog is working. And so, what you don't want to do is you don't want to distract that dog. You don't want to go over and pet that dog. What you can do, though, is talk to the handler. You can say, gee, you've got a gorgeous dog here. Can I say hi? Now, some handlers will say, absolutely, I'd love for you to say hi to my dog. Some handlers will say, actually, let me take the harness off before you say hi. And that's a clue to the dog to say, okay, your business suit's off. You no longer are working. Yeah, please say hi. And usually when that happens, it's really funny, because the dog goes from this, very in control, focused individual to, whoa, 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 I'm just a Labrador Retriever, usually he's pretty enthusiastic. But you should always talk to the handler, before either, approaching or touching a guide dog.
Talking about dogs, and their jobs. And I just love how you kind of talked about when the dog gets its harness off, because at the end of the day, like, these are still dogs. Like, they are, they're working, and they're trained and highly trained to do their jobs and keep their handler safe. So I think that's just such an incredible distinction. There are a lot of discussions about kind of service animals and emotional support animals. Can you give us some insight about the difference between the two?
There's a huge difference between the two. And honestly, the plethora of emotional support animals that we've seen over the last several years has become a challenge to the independence of clients using a guide dog. But the difference between the two is that a service dog is a dog that has been trained to do a specific task to mitigate someone's disability. So, of course, in the case of someone who's blind or visually impaired, a guide dog has been trained to take a client, safely from point A to point B. That's the task that they've been trained to do. An emotional support animal basically is an animal that an individual finds comfort in. I have 3 dogs of my own. Each one, brings joy into my life, but none of them have been trained to any type of specific task or to mitigate any type of disability. The difference between an emotional support pet and a trained service dog in public is that if you look at a guide dog, we our dogs have had 18 months of training. We start training at 5 days of age. Our dogs have been trained to be in all kinds of situations: restaurants, buses, airplanes, places of work, walking on the street. They're bulletproof. An emotional support animal is, well, yes, that brings comfort to an individual, has not really been trained for all these different types of circumstances. And where the challenge has come is that when places of business, airlines allow emotional support animals in the same spaces as legitimate service dogs, those animals, depending upon the situation, can get scared. They can lash out. They can hurt their own person. They can hurt somebody else. They can hurt the guide dog. So, these are dogs that just haven't been trained for the situations, that public situations that a normal service dog has been trained for.
Well, that's definitely a very important distinction, and thanks for making that point and for illuminating all of the great work that Guide Dogs for the Blind and other similar organizations are doing to give people, a partner that can help them better maneuver through their world. For people who might be listening to this and might be getting inspired to want to get involved in contributing to the great work that you guys do, what opportunities are available, or how can they get involved?
Oh, thank you so much. Um, we are an organization of volunteers. We're a staff of 300, and we have 3,000 volunteers. So we cannot do our job without the help of our communities. Um, and that's anything from puppy raising, which is an amazing, amazing opportunity to take an 8-week-old puppy and raise it until it's about 16 months of age, until it's ready to come back to one of our campuses to learn its guide skills, to a whole plethora of opportunities on our campuses to support the work we do. Anything from being a puppy socializer. My favorite is puppy cuddler. So at 5 days of age, um, we say we start our training. Well, what that training is we have our cuddlers who sit with the moms and take those little babies and literally cuddle them. That's, so that these babies at 5 days of age are now starting to get used to human touch, human smell, so that there's nothing scary, about a human. We have people who are dog walkers for us. We have people who help transport our clients. We have people who help with food service. So lots and lots and lots of opportunities. We're always looking for more volunteers and would really encourage people, if you have an interest, to go to our website, which is www.guidedogs.com. And there's all kinds of information about volunteering and ways that you can get involved.
That is incredible. Melts my heart. So if you're a dog person and you just have to go cuddle a puppy, you have the opportunity. I love that so much. And even from there's like so many different stages of involvement that people can have, which I really, really enjoy about your organization, that, you can go during the day and kind of participate for a couple hours, or puppy raise at home, which is bringing that puppy home into your house with you for, what did you say, 16 months?
16 months. There's, also foster volunteers. We have dogs that are in training that don't necessarily kennel well. So we have volunteers who take these amazingly trained dogs home at night, bring them back in the morning for their training, pick them up at night, keep them over the weekend. So lots of foster opportunities as well. So we are very, very dependent upon our volunteers and very grateful for the work that they do.
And is it just local to the North Bay? I can't remember where at exactly you're located, or is there opportunities throughout the state?
Yeah, so with regards to campus opportunities, we have 2 campuses. One is in Marin County in San Rafael. The other is outside of Portland, Oregon. However, puppy raising, we have 2,000 puppy raisers in the 10 western states as far east as Texas. So if you're anywhere in the West, there's many opportunities to puppy raise.
Wonderful. Well, I think some folks that are listening will definitely be interested in checking that out. I think that's a good place to end our conversation here. thank you, Chris, so much for sharing all your insight and experience. I think one of the really cool things about our exhibition right now, Disney Cats and Dogs, is that we're able to look at just all the different ways that cats and dogs come into our life, not just through the media we consume or the pets that we have in our house, but as Bri says, all the dogs with jobs that we see all around us that are just so critical in making sure that people can live as full and mobile of a life as possible. So, Chris, again, thank you for joining us and speaking about your organization and your experience.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
Well, this episode has really gone to the dogs, so it's as good of a time as any to wrap up. To learn more about Guide Dogs for the Blind, visit their website at guidedogs.com, and to see upcoming programs at the Walt Disney Family Museum, visit our calendar at waltdisney.org/calendar. We've got some really cool programs being announced soon, so stay tuned.
Thanks for tuning in to WDFM, the official Walt Disney Family Museum podcast. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and follow us on all social channels at WDF Museum for all the latest updates.
I double dog dare you to keep moving forward. Bye.
Bye.